So there were a lot of sequelae to the COVID epidemic. One of them was in roughly 21, 22. There was a pretty massive resignation, the Great Resignation, they called it. Employees were resigning. And companies were trying to investigate why this was happening. And they identified that most employees were saying, my culture, my work culture is toxic, and I don't want it anymore. In fact, employees would rather, by tenfold, deal with a compensation cut than a toxic work environment, which is pretty shocking. The 5 attributes that I was referencing in the opening are cutthroat, unethical, abusive, non-inclusive, and disrespectful. And interestingly, it's actually disrespect what drives one of those 5, the top ones that drives employees from their companies. And clearly there's massive financial and other ramifications from this.
Real quickly, I think we're well aware of some of the costs mentioned there, but in specific in healthcare, the likelihood of a quality or safety event occurring in a toxic environment is increased, cost is increased, your risk of malpractice is increased. All of these are verified in the literature, and of course the impact on burnout. So I think everybody realizes the magnitude and gravity of this problem. Kurt was going to just show you a few more slides, and then we'll get to the case scenario.
So we want you to understand that when we were given this gift by the Wellness Committee, there's no evidence base for the things that we're talking about. The principles we're going to talk about are very well used, but there isn't, if you go into the literature, you can read nursing literature about toxic bullying in the workplace and nurses, but there's not a lot. So we're learning with you today, and your feedback will be really important. So we wanted to invite you to use 3 principles. The first one is the North Star. What do you want? In a toxic situation, you are taking a step back and giving yourself a moment to step away from being violent or hostile and silent. And so you ask the question, what do I really want out of this situation? The second thing is this concept of the circle of influence, the circle of concern. So when you got up this morning, you decided when you're going to get up, what you're going to eat for breakfast, and whether you're going to call home and say hi to the family, or you just go do the fun run. Okay, you have things in your control. In the circle of influence, when you go to work, there are things that you can influence, that whether it's because of your position, your respect in the organization, you can influence what the demeanor of people in the operating room. You can influence a lot of different things. What you can't do is you can't influence things that you're concerned about but don't have influence over. Here's an example. I might really be offended by people poaching ivory in African countries, okay? That might be something I think is really terrible. I could picket in the United States. It doesn't have any influence about what happens, okay? So when we waste our time is when we're in the circle of concern. So you want to ask the question, what's in your control and what's under your influence? The more time you spend in areas where you're influential, in your organization, your influence grows. When you show up, when you finish assignments, when you contribute, you're being influential and your footprint grows. When you focus on the circle of concern, you're picketing about ivory at the state capitol, okay? You're not doing the things that you can be influential in, and your influence decreases and you become a little bit of a pain in the butt, okay? And lastly, so you want to ask the question, what's your story? What's the data about the situation that you're in? Why are you invested in this? If there's a person or a group that you're in conflict with, you ask them, what's your story? Help me understand where you're coming from. look for a way to find an area of common ground, mutual understanding, and then begin testing what the next steps will be. Again, we're going back to saying, North Star, what do you really want? What's in your influence? And then third, what's your story? So for the next 10 minutes, we would like you to get in groups of 3. Okay, so that means you two in the back row come up here, and I would suggest that you do gender crossover, okay? You come over here, David, and if you would go over with the other group, okay? And so we're going to give you 10 minutes. Helen, which one are we doing? Okay, you guys do scenario 3, and you're going to do okay 1. All right. Now, when you report back, we want you to answer these questions. What did you learn? And what are you going to do tomorrow when you go back home? What are you going to do differently? And here's a rule about reporting back. Don't tell us what the scenario is. We know what the scenario is, and they do too, okay? Because it takes a minute or so, and we want to spend your time hearing from you about what you learned, okay? Ready, set, go.
Okay. So with the scenario presented to us, we had a great conversation, and the first thing, it was sort of a jolt, and you're in a meeting, so we said we would take time, meaning seconds, to sort of find our North Star and sort of calm ourselves down initially. So I gave the example, I have an email box that says answer in 24 hours, and if it's a little bit of a difficult email to answer, it gets done tomorrow, but we don't have that opportunity. We're in a meeting, so take a couple seconds, gather ourselves. Then the second thing we came up with was acknowledge the problem. And so say, we understand this is a problem. We are here to help with you try to solve it. The third thing we came up with was to provide some education and understanding of why the solution presented to us might not be ideal, and allow us to explain that, why we have difficulties with that solution. And then the fourth thing was to ask for some more time to go back to our divisions and come back with different solutions. And so that's sort of how we de-escalated. Hopefully now, he might say, you need to answer this tomorrow, but I don't think that's...
So I'm going to reframe this a little bit. So you asked for time to bring your story back to administration.
No, bring what was... We were division directors, or you're surgeon-in-chief. Well, you were the surgeon-in-chief while attending a division-chief meeting, new hospital president. Right. So we wanted to allow the divisions to go back to their teams and come up with solutions instead of accepting that solution that was provided by the hospital president.
Language is so important, and I really like how you're starting with acknowledging, hey, we're in this together. We realize finances are an issue. In the lean culture, when they have report outs, when groups have developed projects, we had rules. First thing you say, this is what I like about what you've done, and then please consider, as opposed to, yeah, we understand there's a problem, but, and
we acknowledge there's a financial problem, but, and not doing that. So that's something I'm definitely going to take home from this and sort of rephrase that. Words are.
They say, but is a verbal eraser. It erases everything you've said up to that point. So, next group.
Who's supposed to first? So for our situation, the things that we had kind of discussed were.
This is number 3.
Yeah, situation 3. So the first thing we wanted to acknowledge was that the patient was the primary concern, and to kind of ignore other factors except what was the most important part, which was caring for the child. And the big thing with that was educating from our point of view on why we chose our decision, but then asking the cardiac surgeon what was really important from their point of view that they were worried about, and then kind of, I guess, like a shared decision-making model almost. And then the other thing was the mutual respect, which we thought was something wasn't going to be fixed at the bedside at that exact moment in time. So potentially just, again, focusing on the child at hand, and then maybe at a later time addressing the lack of mutual respect. Did I miss anything?
Building on what the other group said about acknowledgement, how could you acknowledge these?
I mean, comments like, I understand you might be concerned, and then acknowledging their distress or whatever. And, we had mentioned that we weren't sure what kind of situation the cardiac surgeon was coming in, like maybe another patient of his had just died and then he came over here and it was like, super urgent, or maybe there was something he did during his surgery on the child that made him think that there was, dead gut or what have you. So, I think trying to understand what pathway they're coming from or what shoes they're walking in versus what you are, and then coming to like a middle ground.
So the things that were powerful that I heard you say were, you state that the patient well-being is your dominant concern for both of you. You're building some common ground there, and you're inviting the surgeon to share what's going on with them that's making them move into attack mode. You have a database about caring for neck babies in single ventricle patients that he doesn't. So you're going to share that with them, and then if I heard you right, you're inviting them to come up with a plan that you both feel comfortable with. Is that fair? Okay.
What about the impact of this conversation on other people who witness it in the ICU?
I mean, I can't speak for all of us, but personally, I think it would be. It's streamed. Oh. I was like, oh my God. I think personally, I would feel exactly what he said. Any competent surgeon, I would immediately be like, okay, I'm incompetent in this person's point of view, and I think it would challenge my own self-confidence and then make me also worry that then the fellow and residents and med students all think I'm not that bright as well. But
Thank you for your feedback, Dr.
yeah, I would probably honestly just ignore the comment from him and just pretend it hadn't been said, and then that would be discussed at like a later moment, like if I ran into him in the hallway or whatnot.
I totally agree with all that. And I think this is a pretty relatable situation. And all of you just said, I completely agree with as well. But sometimes the theatrics can end up getting amplified depending on the personalities too that you're dealing with. So when I've been in a scenario like this before, I've actually said, I think let's have this conversation over in this empty ICU bed. I think we can talk about it more in detail to just try and remove the audience component. But I do think it's super fascinating that these strike you initially as very different scenarios. The system's super high stakes as well for sure, but a clinical scenario. But one of that like maybe initial first step is, okay, let's try and take the emotional component out of it. Let's stay objective, find a common ground, and just sort of like open the conversation. Like, let's get the communication going without the antics or the drama. But definitely a very challenging situation. And all of what you described, I totally feel that way too. Like, you're just like, oh, maybe something, you question. Because of course, you have to consider, am I wrong? Is he, but yeah, I think a conversation like this would be well suited to not having an audience present, but necessarily.
So I'm just curious, how many of you have actually read Crucial Conversations? Yeah, I would highly recommend it. It's very impactful. I think it's very clearly written, and the language that you use in the moment can be really constructive, or it can escalate the challenge. So on the back, we put the reference. I'd encourage you to. Some institutions actually have Crucial Conversation training programs.
There's actually, if you Just as a note, if you search it on Google, there's I think it's like a 3 to 4 minute summary of the book, which, I mean, certainly reading the book would be better, but like if you want to get like a teaser, like we did earlier, that's a good way to get an intro to it. But Kurt, did you have anything?
So this was made to make you laugh, the Steve Jobs thing, okay? This is where he pulled out the iPad 20 years ago. There's a fourth principle that we didn't use, which is there are some situations where the toxicity is insoluble, that it's outside of any influence or control that you have. You will discover that for yourself. But if you're in an unethical environment, if the workplace is damaging your health, your marriage, your sense of identity, then we each are going to approach that a little differently. There may be a time to go. And so we just want to acknowledge that you can bring the best the best principles into the workplace, but if the environment does not want to adjust, then there may be a time to go. You have to decide that. And I think in the concept of the wellness committee, submitting a wellness referral, contact someone in your Connect 5 group, people that you know and love and respect, that you trust, and share with them their concerns and help them give you feedback about the situation so you don't stay in some place that will hurt your health or your family. Okay. Please sign into the session, click the feedback part, and tell us what we could have done better, because this is a journey. And the Wellness Committee this is going to happen to all of us. I had 30 years of it with one individual in our group. And bis nächstes Jahr. Vielen Dank. Come back and give us more information so we can do a better job next year. See ya. Thank you for coming.